Okay. Hello, everyone. We're just gonna sit here and wait a few minutes for this to start. I'm gonna play a song so you're not sitting in total silence, but we will be back with you in a few minutes. Love will call. Running down the start of the yard. Oh, love will call. Love will make you feel love. Sometimes take you by your pants and swing over his head, bring you back and forth to your life. Want to follow yeah. Okay. I think we have enough people rolled in here. That's enough Cameron Winter for everybody. So welcome. Thank you all for joining here on whatever day it is. Is it Wednesday? Is it Tuesday? I don't know. But welcome to the Price of Influence. We're super excited to jump into this. We're going to be joined later by Luke Klein from the Aerie team and Brandon, who are going to go through some of this in action. But you're stuck with me for a few minutes here. And we, I want to start this off um, by talking a bit structurally about what is happening in relation to influencer pricing and for us this theme that we've been talking about for a few months now in our marketing and otherwise is absolutely not about driving down the price of an influencer post for any one individual person, but it is about the industry as a whole. And you know, we as we look at it, and as we look at influencer pricing as a market, it is one that is priced inefficiently, and markets that are priced inefficiently create a lot of opportunity, but also an enormous amount of risk. Um, and so, our predictive models and what we are doing, and the new way we are executing campaigns, which Brandon and Luke are going to go through in more detail, are an attempt to correct some of those inefficiencies, and add more clarity to the space. And so before we dive into that, I just want to set the stage here, and explain how we got where we are and why here at Fohr we think this is the right time to roll predictive out and push this new way of working. So one is this idea of a power law holdover. So the influencer space used to be driven by power law dynamics, meaning that there was a really small number of people who held like most of the online influence in the world. Um, and they could charge a really large premium for that. And one reality where we think you know, pricing has not yet reflected is that the supply of creators has increased dramatically. Just between 2021 and 2022, I think there was a 48% increase in people who called themselves professional creators. From 2020 to 2024, 7.5 times more people doing this as a full-time job. The 3 million is an estimate. It's honestly probably quite a bit higher than that. And so in a world where brands have a lot more choices and a lot more supply of people that they can work with, the market stops being as influenced by those power law dynamics, and operates a bit more linearly. Um, Another is this idea of pricing contagion. There are still creators that absolutely demand, you know, really large, really large pay. And as we think about the kind of top 1%, the best of the best, um, both in reach, in quality, in just their unique point of view, um, there is absolutely, a very large number of people who um, you just can't uh, go find uh, a lot of people doing what they are doing, or the results that they drive are so extraordinary that they can charge a lot for that. This is something you see in a lot of creative fields. I mean, look at actors. Obviously, there are a small handful of actors who can command a much higher price than most other people um, because of what they do for ticket sales, because of their craft, because of the awards they've won, whatever it might be. Part of the issue and something we're trying to separate out is making sure that the top 10% who are still doing an incredible job, who are still driving really great results, aren't pricing themselves alongside the top 1%. Um, and we think that is happening in some cases. Um, we see examples of this. We recently had a campaign. We sent out first offers. This was I'd say mostly a mid-tier follower count campaign. First offers 121K. The counters came back at 790,000. That's 553% increase. Um, some of this is also based on historical pricing foundations. Some of the mathematical models that we have rolled out are based on financial markets. And if you think of a stock is a reflection of the future earnings of the company. So it is pricing not what the company did last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but what is the company likely to do in the next month, 6 months, 12 months, 5 years. Influencer pricing is weighted to history. Um, and so, part of what predictive does is shifts that to be more forward facing and looks at historical performance and then says what is likely to happen in the future, which is heavily impacted by what's been happening, not in the last 6 months, but the last, 6 weeks on their accounts as the algorithm shifts and consumer taste change. But historically, historical performance being the foundation of pricing is creating some inefficiencies that we are trying to fix. Another is misaligned incentives. I mean, most markets have uh, buyers and sellers whose incentives are not the same. But you have agencies who make money as a percentage of the costs, and and so they're not. You have players in the market that are not tripping over themselves to say maybe things are more expensive than they should be. Maybe we should think about how to bring the pricing down, because if you are motivated by driving the pricing up, and that's how you're compensated, then we have different parties whose goals in setting pricing may not be totally aligned with driving the most performance and again creating a market that is operating efficiently. Uh, there's also no clearing mechanism. What this means is that there is no third party that can come through and share what the prices are. There's no Zillow, right? If you think of a real estate market where every home sale was private and you could never know what your neighbor's house was worth, it would create a lot of fluctuation. And it would create a situation where the buyers and sellers don't have a source of truth to say, well, this is what comps in the area are priced at. And so then let's talk about the unique attributes of this particular property or this particular example here and price that accordingly. So because that doesn't exist in the influencer space, again, it means that we can see wild fluctuations, and that isn't, that isn't anyone's fault, actually. There is just no source of truth to know uh, what is the actual market rate for the work that is being done. Um, then we have the algorithm. There is, part of what we're talking about it for. It's less about it being a pricing problem necessarily, but it's a price and performance. And so we want to make sure with extraordinary compensation comes extraordinary results. And there are creators that are driving that. We want to overwhelmingly make sure our clients are working with those creators. But the algorithm is frustrating. It's frustrating to have have a big part of your business be run by something that you have no control over. And being in this space for 13 years, I've seen how frustrating it is for creators to go from being able to build a following and to be able to consistently reach that following to having to react to the whims of the algorithm. But the truth for us, and as we think about how do we make this into a more efficient market, it's that we are going to, again, overwhelmingly try and find the creators who are tapping into the algorithm effectively, and who are reaching um, the target audience for the brand consistently. And that while some of the constraints placed on the space because of these algorithms are not inherently fair, they are real. And there is also a difference in how some people are navigating it. And the compensation for that needs to be different. The last point, and this is kind of ties all of this together, is currently the rates aren't actually a market. A market goes up and down. A ratchet is a market that prices only go up. So again, if we go back to the stock market, if a company is not performing as well, or if people believe that they won't perform as well in the future, the price of that stock goes down. We don't have that in the creator space. Prices basically only go up. Um, and and so again, prices are tied to the time when somebody was performing the best, and that time may not be today, and that's something that we are looking at. And so as we kind of look at the market generally, again, like our push for this, and our push to talk more about pricing is in defense of this market writ large. We know that brands don't have to spend money in the influencer space, and they are looking at these investments against their other media investments that they're making. And while at Fohr, we believe that creator marketing is the future of marketing, I think most people have coalesced behind that idea. It doesn't mean that brands are preordained to be spending money in here at the rates that they are forever if they can't pull performance out of it. We don't want influencer budgets to become discretionary. We don't want them to become a nice to have, to become foundationally locked into everything a brand is doing. We have to compete better with Meta, with TikTok, with other channels. And as we look at some of the pricing in the market, it makes that very difficult to do that. Now, as we move into the next part of this conversation and talk about what we've done with Aerie, we see an example where we were able to um, bridge that gap, drive, you know, incredible performance that's, hundreds of percent larger than the industry standard, while um, partnering with amazing creators, maintaining agency and ownership over creative and doing something really positive and fun and impactful. And I think it's such a great example of the future and the vision that we see for this space, and excited for Brandon and Luke to walk you through it.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. It's great to see y'all. I am Brandon. I'm the VP of Client Services here at Fohr. I've been at Fohr a little over 8 years now, and I've had the pleasure of working with Aerie and Luke for about half of that time. And yeah, we're really excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about some of what James was talking about, but in practice, and how we really think about influencers operating as a performance channel. So ultimately, that is where we want to start. But just want to, before we jump into that, want to quickly just ground everybody in the context of the program that we run with Aerie. And then we'll let Luke jump in to talk a little bit more from a strategy perspective, as I think it'll help ground everybody really in how we think about how Aerie functions with influencers. So I'll jump in quickly, and then Luke, I'll pass it to you. But yeah, we've been working with Aerie over the last few years on this always on program that has taken a lot of different shapes over the last few years. It's been something that we continue to optimize and iterate quarter over quarter. It is a quarterly program. And this allows us to continue to change and find ways to improve every month. Essentially, we're finding new ways to create different work streams, different ways to partner with creators, different personas, which we'll get into all of this. Um, but what it's allowed us to do is really create something that can move and make a lot of movement within Aerie as well. So I think, Luke, to kind of kick us off, would love to hear specifically about how you guys talk about influencer within Aerie.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll just do a really quick introduction. So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining today. We're really excited to share really the journey that we've been on together because this has definitely been a partnership and a partnership in evolving how we think about influencer. I lead the growth and marketing strategy for Aries. So, you know, really focused on not just like what are the channels and tactics that we're leveraging, but holistically where are we going to grow, how are we going to grow, and how do we use marketing as a part of that growth system. And I would say, whenever we kind of started this journey, we were in a really different place with influencer. I think that obviously the industry has evolved over time, but it was sort of what James talked about, where it was sort of this discretionary spend. It sat over here. It wasn't necessarily positioned as a part of our holistic marketing mix. And now we really think about it as just really another channel within the total mix. And we have different objectives assigned to different parts of our influencer program. So, I think that for all of you that are marketers on the phone, we all know and feel the pressure to make sure that we're showing measurable results for the actions that we're taking. Like nothing is just uh, we do it because it feels good. And that's really how we've evolved and how we think differently about influencer as a part of the total mix.
And Luke, I think something that you and I have talked a lot about is like really thinking about influencer as a performance channel. I think what we've been kind of forecasting for years that's going to happen, that we've really in the last 12 months have started to see a huge pendulum shift with influencer moving closer and closer to the center of the marketing mix. And because of that, we need to make sure that there are results coming through from that content. We know it works. We've seen those results. Now we're seeing influencers show up in all of these different places, and we need to be able to kind of back that up with results for brands to continue to invest in it. What kind of like transitioning into how we talk about predictive, and that's where this comes into play, specifically as you guys talk about influencer as a performance channel, is that we're able to guarantee the performance of content so that as you're investing dollars, we're able to kind of back those up with results. And they're typically minimum results, right? Like we're backing into something that we're saying this is the minimum we expect to see. But because we know influencers are going to outperform, the algorithm may do incredible things for us depending on how the content's performing, how the content's getting leveraged through collab posts and in other ways. It allows for us to over deliver on those results and continuing to push and move the needle. Something that I would love to kind of talk to you a little bit more about is specifically where influencer ultimately kind of sits in that larger marketing mix for you guys. We don't just work with influencers in the traditional content capacity. We do events with you. We do product seeding. Would love to talk a little bit about where that ultimately sits for you guys.
Yeah, so and it's kind of it doesn't sit in one place per se. Because I think that historically we always leveraged influencer for like specific campaign pulses. So we would maybe bring in one campaign a quarter, and it would tie more into like, here's the idea, here's the message that we need to deliver. It's part of this integrated marketing campaign, and we would sort of run it in these like short pulse waves. Now we still do that, and really we first think about, okay, like what's the creative idea behind this campaign, and then determine is influencer, like a prevalent part of the comm strategy to be able to deliver that message. I would say 9 times out of 10 it is. And I think a lot of that is because of what our brand is and what we stand for and, the authenticity in the brand. But we've also moved influencer, and I would say, Brandon, keep me honest on this, but I think it's probably been about 2 years where we also moved influencer to be a part of our always on marketing mix. Um, and truly, like the goal there was to have sustained visibility brought to life through an influencer voice, to be out there generating visibility, impressions, and scale on a pretty like consistent basis over time. I think if you kind of take a step back and think about how, the consumer thinks and acts today, like we forget things the moment after we see them. So we have to have this really like repeatable echo chamber that is like telling the story, reinforcing the story, and making sure that that's happening through different angles. Like our customer has to see something 15 times to remember it, and we're leveraging influencer as a part of that mix to make sure that they are seeing a message 15 times, and obviously using a different creative angle to do it. We also, and I think you kind of touched on this, like influencer is unique in that it's both a creative channel and a media channel, because ultimately the influencer, the creative, is developing the content. So, we think about it in that way to really make sure that we're extending the reach of the content. So, we'll go live, we'll call it quote organically because influencer is a paid channel, but we'll go live organically, understand what's really working, and then we have a pretty agile approach to then pull content through into our amplification mix with paid media. So, it is sort of like this whole connected ecosystem with, like influencer and content at the center of it.
I think, Luke, something that you've kind of skirted around a little bit, and I think both of us have, is really what the influencer's kind of North Star is for the content that they're creating. And I think that to me has been the big unlock for us in the last 2 years in thinking about influencer having a bigger ripple effect within the organization and specifically in how you're kind of thinking about marketing. So I would love to kind of talk a little bit about the Aerie Real strategy. And obviously, this is something that we've been working really closely with you on. And kind of talking, I'll talk from my end about like how we're briefing creators, and would love to talk a little bit about how you think about how Aerie Real shows up in other ways through marketing. So for everyone on the call today, the way that we talk about Aerie and the way that we brief in the creators is more unique than I've seen with a lot of brands, as that we're not really focusing on key messages and products. The products are the vehicles and the heroes. Obviously, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that people are buying Aerie products. The way that ultimately comes to life is laddering up to this larger strategy centered around Aerie Real, which expands outside of influencer. It's really Aerie's North Star for how they show up. It's Luke can do a better job of explaining it, but it's really allowing for people to show up as their everyday selves and have products and clothes that make them feel comfortable doing that. And that's ultimately like the brief that the team shares with the influencers always starts with that airy real message. Obviously, during the holidays and summer, you're showing off different products and wearing different things and maybe doing different activities, but it all ladders back to this level of authenticity. And I think that word gets thrown around a lot in influencer. I think Aerie does a phenomenal job of being able to really kind of double down on that and let the creators have fun in that space.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. But I think that, if you take a step back and you say like, why is influencer a part of our marketing mix? Um, because ultimately, and James kind of alluded to this, like you're paying a premium CPM for influencer as a marketing channel. And so, the reason we leverage influencers because they are advocates. They have, like a specific point of view, and people ultimately come to them and want to engage in their content for that point of view. So I think that, you sort of have to like think about the old way of branding. That used to be like, okay, there's one message, we want everyone to communicate it. It's got to be consistent. And, I have a lot of isms, but one of my isms is that the luggage does not have to match. It just has to root back to a key idea about your brand. And so the way that we think about briefing influencers is what is the key narrative that we want Aerie to be famous for? And really let the influencer do what they do best. And the reason why we pay them a premium is translating that to their audience. So and that has been one of the key changes that we've made that allows us to operate with more agility and run an always on program. I think before when it was like, hey, here's this sweater, we want you to talk about the buttons and the details, like that takes a ton of back and forth with the influencer because we're forcing them to do something that they may not have naturally done. So, today our brief is really we think about the casting strategy to represent the authenticity and the nuance of what the brand stands for. We give them a key narrative that we want them to communicate, but then we ultimately allow them the creative freedom to do it in the way that is true to themselves and as an individual and to their audience. So I think that that has been it's a pretty seismic shift in how we think about branding, but it's one of the reasons why we see the results that we do. Otherwise, we should be producing the content ourselves as a brand.
Yeah, and I think there's something interesting specifically around like we create this guardrail, and one of our isms is we build a fence and let the creators play, and that's ultimately what this Airy Real framework is a fence for the creators to play in, and I would definitely say it's one of the more expansive ones in terms of what brands really allow creators to create. And I think even if you look at these four examples from our holiday program, they all look and feel very different. They all have their own personalities. They all have their own stories. I think that's a really big component too, is there's storytelling that happens in the content. It's very rare that people are just showing products that they're wearing, like they're doing something in them. They're telling a larger story, which ultimately makes the content more engaging and more entertaining to watch and continue to share with your friends. I think specifically for this program, and this was our Q4 holiday program, we had just started rolling out Predictive. This was one of our first pilot programs that we had run a Predictive program. We contracted a high volume of partners, which was interesting to us to be able to kind of test this way of working and really see pressure test it and see how it came to fruition. Aerie has been continually one of our top performing brands in the fashion space, and we wanted to continue to kind of raise the bar, not only for ourselves, but for Luke and his team. And I think, what we did here and the way that the Aerie program is structured is we worked with 39 creators on this program. A lot of times brands ask us, what tier of creator is the most important? And I think before I jump into kind of like how we identify those creators, Luke, I think it would be helpful to hear a little bit about how we've talked about the different tiering of the creators and why ultimately we work with celebrity, macro, mid-tier, micro, and nano, and the roles that each of those play within this ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, the answer to that question is all of them are important. Um, and it really depends on, finding the optimal mix to achieve the objective that you've laid forward. We've really found a lot of success in, we balance obviously macro, and still allow them to have creative freedom. But we found so much success in the sort of like mid-tier micro and nano because, and maybe I should back it up to say, like Reel as a platform is very unique and individual, which I think allows us to do what we do. Like, so when you're going down this journey, you have to really know what you stand for as a brand. And for us, like being grounded in real, it wouldn't make sense for us to try to force a specific narrative through our creator partners. We've kind of leveraged the different tiers in different strategic ways. Like we think about macro as like a high visibility driver. So we goal that more against like impression and reach. It's not necessarily that macro has to like have this celeb status. It's more just about reach and visibility. And then as you kind of drill down, we see better engagement. We have a what we call a subculture strategy that is really intended to help us to generate unique reach. And we are leveraging sort of the mid-tier and micro and nano to help us to achieve that strategy. Really, the thinking behind that is like, we are a brand that operates in the fashion space. If we're only working with fashion influencers, we're creating an echo chamber. But people's lives are different. All of us have different interests. And so we want to make sure that we're showing up in those interest verticals. And really like the micro and nano creators help us to do that. We also have partnered with Fohr. So, as a brand, we have strategic focus on building more visibility in specific regions where we haven't historically had brand presence. And so we leverage Nano to also achieve that goal, making sure that like, they're not just located in the market, but their sphere of influence is within the market. So, it's kind of like a couple of different things that we're achieving, but really it's like first identifying what your objective is, what your brand marketing strategies are, and then aligning influencer as a channel against it.
Yeah, I think it's super helpful and I appreciate the context. I think that's where brands often get tripped up on almost like decision paralysis and like what tier of creator should I work with? And, we have seen so much success with creators at all different levels. And I think that's something that we've been really impressed by how we've been able to kind of leverage them for different use cases. Like, for example, our nano creators don't do content review. They're submitting content to our team and then are just kind of continuing to create a healthy stream of additional content for you. And we've gotten to the point now where the content has gotten so good that it's actually getting posted in collaboration with the Aerie account. And that is one other thing I want to talk about is how y'all think about collab posts. And I can kind of drive a bit more from like the organic side of it, but really what we've seen is again, brands ask this question a lot, like what's the impact of a collab post? And we've seen it exponentially impact the performance of content. And I would say out of the Instagram content, about 90% of it gets posted in collaboration with the Aerie channel. So Luke, I don't know if there's any additional conversations or insights that you wanted to add on that before I jump in to talking about how we identify the influencers and tying it back to predictive. But I think setting this stage is helpful for everyone just to understand kind of like the scene that we're currently in.
Yeah, I mean, I think just related to the collab posts, again, like we're paying to work with these partners and we're doing it because they help us to engage a different audience and have sort of a different angle into the brand. So, it kind of just makes sense for us to do that. And, this is all going to be bound by your brand and your strategies. So what works for us may not work for everyone based on what you're trying to achieve and your brand position. But I do take it back to this focus on authenticity. And we always think about like our brand is a mirror of our customers. And ultimately, our creators are our customers. And so we leverage those collaborations and ultimately a lot of the creator content to just kind of show them that we get them and ultimately that we are them as a brand. And obviously, we've seen a lot of success in that.
Yeah, and I think it's a big thing, especially knowing that like new consumer acquisition has been something for y'all, like new customer acquisition. Like this is a really strong way to bring these massive followings under the like Aerie fold, and then also realize that they see themselves in the content, they see themselves in how Aerie wants to show up and represent influencers. And I think, we've seen a lot of success on that as well. So pivoting slightly, and I'm going to share my screen just to show a couple of examples of some content creators that we worked with and tie it back to predictive. So the way that we identify creators using predictive has changed a lot over the last few months, but we've gotten down to this science that allows us to identify creators based on their predicted views. It allows for us to guarantee the performance of content when we're working with brands to align on budget and what our larger goals are, making sure that influencers are identified not only by their following size but by their views. The way that we think about it is that we need a minimum number of views depending on the tiers and what they're ultimately contributing to the larger target. As a group, we think about it from a brand fit and ultimately from an archetype fit as well. Those three things in conjunction, if people get excellent views, but they don't feel airy, it doesn't do what we ultimately need it to do. We need those three things to work together. So this is an example of some of the creators that we partnered with. Like I said, we worked with 39 creators for this program. And you can see here that we worked with macro, mid-tier, micro, and nano that all really performed well within their specific tiers. So we have Hannah Fields, who was on Love Island. She had 1.6 million views, and she has a following of just under a million. So we're seeing that some of these creators are outperforming even their own following sizes. We identify all of these creators using views, and then we contract them with targets. So it's a shared goal between our team and the influencer. We work with their agents, whoever it may be, to ensure that we're aligned on what those goals are to ultimately be able to guarantee that performance. We partner with talent agencies, we partner with the creators directly, whoever it is, to ensure that we're delivering on these results ultimately for the brand. Um, and you can see here we have some nano creators like that have 16,000 and 12,000 followers that are delivering nearly 100,000 views from their content. Some of that is posted in Collab. Hannah's was not actually, she just performed really well on her own. And then TikTok is not posted in Collab. And I know that's been a platform for a lot of brands where they've struggled to see organic performance. I feel like we've seen a really strong shift in the last few months on TikTok where we've started to see performance pick up quite a bit. And this is an example from Kim, who is one of our mid-tier creators. What you can see though is that all of these creators are ultimately outperforming their following sizes. Um, and I think, Luke, one other question that I had, like really about how we talk about the results and ultimately like iterate on the program. We've developed different archetypes, we've built out different personas. Where do y'all kind of like think about like being able to predict the performance of the content? How does that kind of play a factor in how you think of the like makeup of the program and the creator ecosystem there?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it in the exact same way that we plan paid media. Um, because again, influencer is another channel, and really what Four has done is helped us to to understand like the KPI that we should be expecting. So we really look at, when we're developing a strategy or a plan, like what is the total impression volume that we expect to generate? Similar to, like a media buy on Meta, we can estimate what we think those impressions are, but it's ultimately the creative delivery, that helps us to understand if we do or don't achieve them and targeting. So, like we really roll up the predictive model within the total expected media delivery. And that's how we're starting to really think about and assess the mix. I think that we now just look at the really like the percent of in impressions driven through influencer as a piece of the total mix. And that's what we're learning about over time. Like we tie that back to, did we see brand equity lift? Did we see, overall performance lift? And that's sort of giving us the unlock and the signal to say, okay, we should be investing more here. Um, so it is like moving it away from something that's like, oh, we think we should be doing this to actually having the concrete data on the upfront and then on the hindsight to say like, yes, this worked, and let's continue to test and scale this channel.
Yeah, and I think like the way that we've been working really closely with y'all is kind of being able to forecast that and plan quarter over quarter for what we anticipate. And kind of the last point before I pass it over to James to moderate the Q&A is really thinking about competing with ourselves essentially. Like we've continued to see that the content is performing. We set a bar for ourselves. We set goals at the beginning of last year. We set a goal for each quarter, and we saw that the content was continually outperforming what we had expected. So when we ran this predictive model, we created an even more competitive goal for us, and then we ended up doubling that goal. And I think, it really just goes to show the power of predictive, and it's not necessarily us harping on us being able to identify these creators, but it's this shared goal. I think oftentimes influencers say they want to be treated like a business, and this is what that next level of that partnership looks like, right? Like we have goals as Fohr with Aerie that we are looking to achieve to continue to work with you. The same needs to be extended to influencers so that they understand that transparency in what the goal is, why we're working towards it, and how they're contributing to that. And I think oftentimes brands forget that component of it and are treating it more transactionally. And there's an opportunity for us to really bring them into the fold. And I mean, Aerie is one of the brands that I see the most bonus content. Every program we run has a flood of bonus content because the creators understand the goal. They're excited about it. They want to post more content. They want to continue to work with Aerie. They want to continue to get invited to the events and other opportunities. We've really graduated some of the creators in some ways to be part of content series that we've shot. Like there's a lot of different ways that we reward them, and it's part of being in this community, and it's not something that goes away over time. Like people have popped up years later that we love working with that perform really well, and we bring them back into the fold. So I think it's something that is healthy for brands to think about, is like having this group of trust partners, but also having this group of people that we want to continue to test and find newness with.
Yeah.
So
I would say maybe just like one final thought that, to plant with everyone is that historically, I think that influencer always kind of lived within like a brand or creator or creative vertical in organizations. And we now have like a very strong collaborative relationship between strategy, planning, which is my team, and brand. So, Jordan, who is our influencer and social lead, really has the keen eye for understanding like what our brand stands for, partners with Fohr to bring the right people into the program, and, has oversight of the content that actually goes to market. But you really need that counterbalance of both and thinking about, like how as a part of the bigger strategy should influencer perform, what role does it play, and the creative expression side. So, like that might be easier said than done for some, but I do think it's the way that you can really position this as a performance channel and sort of get organizational buy-in to that thinking.
cool. Thank you.
Okay. All right. That was fantastic, y'all. We're gonna roll into some Q&A here, and my marketing team is upset with me because I was supposed to say at the beginning of this that the Q&A is open and you can ask questions. We have one simple, easy one right before, which was the viewership we showed. They were asking if those were, with boosting or if that was the organic viewership.
That's all organic. We do amplify the content in paid channels, but everything that we're talking about today is all organic.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And Luke, I want to hear a bit about how this is interpreted inside of organizations. Because I know on the paid side, I mean, one of the reasons we get questions of like, why are we so focused on views? It can be about other things. But one, like an ad can't work if nobody sees it. Like, so, the more people who can see our ad, the more shots on goal we have to convert them to a customer. But also, the better it performs organically, we generally see that performance carry through to and compound in paid, right? Um, and as you think about influencers changing position in organizations, um, how, you know, how much does and I think for the marketers here of thinking, why should I be maybe leaning into predictive more and really trying to optimize views? So the question is just like, how much easier does it get to expand what you're doing with creators when it's driving the bigger impact?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what is great about Creator as an organic program and as a content program is that you essentially have like a natural testing ground for how the creative content is going to perform in your algo once you boost it or once you amplify it. So, I always say like we have the strategy of getting everything out there, finding the unicorns, and then just making sure that more people are going to see it, which, the algo is the algo. It works for organic and it works for paid. And so you almost have this like um, underwritten guarantee that it's going to just drive even more compounded results. Um, and both serve different purposes. Like obviously, with something that's organic, you also get more benefit of engagement, et cetera, that you don't see as much on the paid side. So I do think that, like organic views and engagement are really important. It's just that they can work together as an ecosystem. And like I'm sure that many brands are feeling the pinch that we are, that like the social space just demands more and more and more content. So use the content that's being generated and that is working, as just like another stream for your amplification.
And Luke, I think something like specifically with the organic viewership and engagement, especially like I feel like this conversation is coming a lot for brands right now is around community building. And Aerie is one of the few brands I see like constantly and like following the brand, but I don't even follow some of the people that are like on TikTok that are showing up on my For You page. I feel like your social team does such a great job of having those conversations and knowing that the content getting posted is step one, engaging with it is step two, and really fostering those conversations. And I think that's something that is really powerful for brands to be a part of that and to participate in it. And I think it makes it so much more engaging and exciting. And there have been people from your team that have been like, hey, this person keeps commenting on this thing or DMing us, like we should try to work with them on this, or we're catching those things when we're pulling out comment sentiment. Like I think there is something really powerful in that. And I think oftentimes like paid is not where we see a lot of the engagement happening or the most relevant engagement. So it is really important to make sure that the content is living and breathing organically first to have that moment for us to really capitalize on it.
Yeah. There was a question here about can you explain the predictive model you used and how do you communicate to influencers that they need to meet a certain view goal? What if they don't meet that goal? So I'll take the first part and explain as much as I can without giving away the secret sauce too much. But in the predictive model, one of the big shifts is we're not looking at averages, but we are taking your historical posts and we're building a probability distribution of what is likely to happen in the future. And then we are weighting those probabilities as we look into the future to estimate what's likely to happen when you post once or twice or whatever it might be. So we get a really good sense of what are the most likely outcomes for this post. We differentiate between sponsored content and organic. We strip out the paid performance from it, so that's not messing things up. We look at the coefficient of variability, so we look at how much the difference between your low performers and high performers swings. All that stuff is calculated and spits out a number. We then tie that to the offer. And so Brandon, maybe can speak a bit about how we then take those probabilities and turn them into offers and how we bring creators in as partners in the accountability for driving the outcomes.
Yeah, I think, transparency is the name of the game here. There's nothing that's like secret in the way that we're doing this. We're using data from content creators' channels to be able to craft these offers to ensure that the goals that they're working towards are achievable. For the Aerie program in particular, I think the hit rate was like 88% of the creators actually hit and exceeded their targets. Obviously, part of the conversation is people are like, that number is huge. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit it. And then we're able to share the data with them to be like, there's a 9 out of 10 chance that you are going to hit this. We've seen it happen time and time again across your content. And what James, what you said earlier about shots on goal, like if for this program in particular, there are two waves of content. So we're increasing the opportunities that influencers have to achieve those goals. For most creators, we do have make goods baked into their contracts so that if they're not hitting their target, our team is tracking it and saying, hey, we're looking like we're not quite where we expected to be. What things can we do to try to get the content to perform? Is that you reposting it? Is that you posting it on your story? Is it doing a syndication through TikTok? What things can we do to try to kind of bolster some of that performance? Currently, there are no consequences. We don't want to punish people. There's things that are technically out of all of our control in terms of how the content's going to perform organically. We just want to set the conditions from the upfront to be able to ensure that we are working towards that goal as closely as possible.
Um, yeah. And I think a last point on that is that I think it's an inevitability that this space is moving to a place where um, the payout, what the creator is paid, or at least a portion of that, the distribution side, if there's a content creation and distribution is kind of a two parts of an offer, um, that will have to be guaranteed. Every other kind of media that there is, it's guaranteed. And I think as brands scale this up, they need those guarantees. And they're just not going to be able to invest if it's, across a campaign, they say I could get 1 million views or 20 million views or somewhere in the middle. And as an industry, it is, again, in our mind, it is inevitability. And that's why Fohr is driving it because we want to have a hand in crafting what that looks like. Um, okay, this is a fun one and fast for Luke and Brandon. What is Aerie scouting for this year, and when can they send pitches?
What are we scouting for? Brandon, maybe I should let you take that one.
I mean, we have a lot of fun stuff coming up this year. I can talk. You guys have launched extension of Aerie, which I think this is a great segue and plug for you, Luke, if there's anything you want to talk about. But Aerie has made this commitment to not using AI in their content. It's been in their influencer content and anything that has humans in it, I think is the exact claim, right? Like anyone that has a human in content, AI is not generating that or impacting it anyway. So we're looking for people who are celebrating life, who are continuing to kind of double down on that message that Aerie's bringing through in their content. I know there's a lot of discourse in the creator community about like AI kind of impacting deals that are coming through for creators and that, brands are able to produce assets on their own. There are things that AI just simply cannot do. And it's having human experiences is kind of like what I will tease about it. So we're looking for creators specifically for that program that's coming up. But we cast quarterly for Aries, so always feel free to DM the like for Instagram or Aerie, and we will put you forward for a campaign. But yeah, Luke, I don't know if there's anything else you want to kind of talk about with that commitment that you guys made.
Yeah, it's really an exciting evolution for the brand. For those of you that intimately know the brand, we obviously kind of drove the body positivity movement when we, 11 years ago, launched our commitment to no retouching and sort of like a no retouching, no supermodels, and really like the cultural landscape has changed so much since then. So We are really just doing this to keep up with the expectation of our customer and what authenticity looks like. So it was last fall that we really declared our commitment that, Brandon summarized it, but to use 100% real people. So we're not going to be generating people's likeness because it's just not real. So, and I think that we've seen that the world of generated content and AI, like I was scrolling Instagram this morning, came across something, and I had to pause and say, oh, like, is this a real person or is this AI generated? We want our customer to know that anything they see from us will be 100% authentically real. So we launched the commitment last year. We've seen a lot of really great engagement with that idea. We kind of have, deepened our declaration of that. Stay tuned tomorrow for, like a pretty big moment for the brand where we're going even further in that commitment. And then really it's going to be rolled out across a lot of the brand DNA. It already is. People should know that when they come to us, they're going to see something that is real, and we're going to be transparent about it. So, that's going to just continue to build over time. We also will have some other, as Brandon mentioned, we are running the Always On program. So we're always re-engaging the partners that we work with. Today, we sort of have this like trust versus test mentality. So we are always looking to stretch ourselves and bring new people into the program to continue to expand how we show up as Aerie Real. But we'll also have some fun additional campaign pulses happening later in the year. We're launching a big um, intimates moment, and then some really fun stuff happening around holiday too.
Fantastic. Last question here, and there was more, but this is the last one we can get to, is knowing how volatile social platform algorithms are, what's the benchmark engagement metrics when vetting and sourcing prospective talent for campaign partnership? For example, do creators have to have a minimum percentage of engagement on TikTok and Meta to be considered? This is actually a great question because it speaks to the foundational inefficiencies in how brands have vetted and looked at stuff in the past. For us, there are no average bench. One, like we're just not using averages because they no longer reflect the reality of what is happening. If you have 10 posts that get 10,000 views and one post that gets 10 million, it's going to say your average views are a math equation I can't do, but they're going to not be representative of what we can reasonably expect to happen the next time you post. So one, we aren't using averages. Another thing is that where this model opens things up is for us, there are no like good, bad influencers, high performing, low performing. There is only a high performing or low performing creator at a certain price. And so if for some reason the performance dips and the price falls in line that it makes sense, in a world where, brands are purchasing influence and eyeballs and distribution and reach, that reach needs to be priced, within a range. And so we can kind of separate ourselves from some of the benchmarking because the benchmark becomes what are we paying for, how many views are we getting for every dollar that we're spending? And that's something that they can normalize and look across Meta, across, traditional paid, across, out of home, whatever it might be, and look at all of these channels and say, like, where am I driving efficiency and where not? So, great conversation. Luke, thank you so much for joining us. Brandon, you're on payroll. You didn't have a choice. Thank you all for coming. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thank you all.
Bye, y'all. Have a good one.